Any other region on the face of the earth would give their eye teeth to have what we have. And we've got to preserve that and grow it and nurture it so that we keep this incredible wealth generator right where it is right now.
We are near the 3-week mark of the UAW strike against General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, a strike that has gotten international attention. So where are we with things? How is this all impacting or will impact the Detroit region? What about electric vehicles? Just how important are the automakers and workers to the local economy? And look, we can't forget the suppliers either. There are a ton of questions, and to shine some headlights on the road ahead, a conversation with John McElroy. He is a well-sourced, experienced industry expert who you can find over on autoline.tv. I felt like I learned a ton on this one. It is Thursday, October 5th, 2023, and I am Jer Stays. This is your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. But first, thank you to our members on Patreon, patreon.com/dailydetroit, for keeping this thing going. We could not do it without you. Local coverage requires local funding. And you can get a Daily Detroit Rocks glass if you sign up for the $10 a month tier over at patreon.com/dailydetroit. Joining me virtually is John McElroy. I think he's one of the best voices to know what's actually going on in the auto industry. Of course, he has been around the industry for a while. You can check out everything that he does over at autoline.tv. You're doing a daily show. You're doing an after-hour show. John, do you sleep?
I do, Jared. I sleep soundly, as a matter of fact.
Maybe because you're so
asking.
tired.
Right.
So all jokes aside, we've got a pretty serious situation in front of us right now, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming you're referring to the UAW strike, and you're absolutely right. This is dead serious for the American auto industry.
Yeah, and multiple parts are at play right now. I mean, I was just talking to a couple of people I know who are that happen to be suppliers, and they're frankly very worried about this.
Extremely worried. And, it's not so much the multinational, multi-billion-dollar tier one suppliers that deal with all car companies all around the world. It's their suppliers, what they call the tier two or even tier three suppliers. These are much smaller companies, typically family-owned, that pretty much have all their eggs in one basket, so to speak. For example, may just supply the Ford F-150 pickup truck. They'll have some component that goes on that. Or, fill in the blank for any other kind of car. And they're almost all of these smaller companies, financially distressed. First it was COVID, then it was the chip shortage. So the American auto industry has probably built close to 8 million fewer vehicles than it would have without those other problems. And it's been devastating for these small companies. Now you throw a UAW strike on top of that, and there's a real danger that a number of them will go out of business, and that will cripple the Detroit 3 when it comes to trying to get back up to speed again.
And I think it'll also cripple the local economy as well. Daily Detroit, we focus a lot on the local region. That's our purview. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this conversation with the suppliers, because although a lot of people are talking about the union and the big three, and we're going to get into that too, that supplier base has such an economic impact, so many workers, that downstream effect as we're going through this strike, I feel we need to make sure we appreciate that.
You're spot on there, because most people don't know this. 80%, that's 80% of the value of a car comes from suppliers. The car company, they make the body, they weld it all together, they make the powertrain. Everything else is purchased from suppliers. So if they get damaged, you're literally seeing the supply base that supports 80% of the value of a car getting damaged.
That's a lot of families. That's a lot of, jobs. Those are jobs that pay for other things. And with this Metro Detroit economy so tightly weaved into automotive, I mean, obviously there has been expansion over recent years and some diversification, but we can't deny that auto is pretty much the big kahuna in this region still.
It is. Look, if Michigan, and especially Southeast Michigan, loses the auto industry, I don't know what it's going to take to get it back on its feet again. It'll take decades, if ever, to recover from it.
That's an interesting point, because I think there's a lot of this talk about, moving forward from autos. And I look at it more as autos as a base to help spin off other innovation and grow, that it's so intertwined that taking out autos is basically, in fact, irreplaceable. I don't have the numbers, though. Do you have any idea around like size or employees or that kind of thing?
I don't have a number off the top of my head, not just for the Southeast Michigan region. But, to use your analogy, this would be like New York City losing Wall Street. Then what? It'd be like LA losing the movie and entertainment industry. Then what? If we lose automotive, we're in deep, deep trouble.
And I think that's key to share, especially with some of our younger listeners who maybe didn't grow up with the auto industry being so paramount. For me, I'm in my 40s. Everyone in my family at some point did a time on the line. And that isn't as much the case nowadays. And I think that maybe there's been a little bit of a loss of appreciation and maybe why there's so many efforts being put in by different levels of government officials to try to keep that here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, our elected officials recognize that if we lose the auto industry, you kiss goodbye to the major tax base of the state. Like I said, it's something that would be extraordinarily damaging to lose.
So let's get into where things are at now. We are recording this on Thursday morning. This is generally a fluid situation. Where do we stand between the big players right now? You've got the domestic three, and you've got the UAW all kind of going at it at once. And that is unprecedented in itself.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think the union has taken an extremely intelligent strategy, for its goals by attacking all three of the automakers, but a little bit at a time. They're slowly ratcheting up the pressure. Probably tomorrow, we're going to hear Shawn Fain, the president of the UAW, announce more plants that are going to close down and go on strike. It's ramping up the pressure slowly on the automakers. They've given an extraordinary number of offers to the union. I think Ford just claimed it's presented its seventh offer. This is highly unusual in negotiations. Usually it takes about 3 offers to get to a solution. But Shawn Fain doesn't want to seem to take yes for an answer so far.
So where are our sticking points? There is the argument that, the UAW did give some concessions when the auto industry was, kind of lower. And there's this back and forth of percentages. But where do those percentages stand to where they were? I feel like this is all kind of mushed up to me as an outside observer.
Yeah, look, it's unclear to us on the outside exactly what the sticking points are and where they stand. But, for example, the union's made it very clear with Ford, and Ford has made this clear too. The sticking point is bringing battery workers into the master agreement. And Ford's objection is, number one, the battery plants have not even been built. Number two, the workers have not even been hired. And number three, it's going to be up to them legally to decide whether they want to join the union or not. So that's a big sticking point. The UAW just wants them automatically included in this negotiations that are going on for the new contract. At Stellantis and GM, we don't know exactly what the sticking points are, but we're probably going to learn more tomorrow about where that stands. But even though so much of this has been negotiated in the media, we don't know all the particular details of where each of one of these stand right now.
Do you feel like this one has a lot of legs? Do you think that maybe one will get solved? Where are we at here? Because I feel like the longer this goes on, the more people who are not immediately tied to the auto industry are going to really feel this.
Well, look, Jared, this is a bigger story than just what's getting negotiated at the tables right now. This is about Shawn Fain and his new cadre leading a new labor movement in America. And as you see, this is going on all across the United States right now. It's not just with the automotive industry. It's with the Teamsters. It's with Starbucks employees and a host of others. And so this is a big moment for Shawn Fain and the new leadership at the UAW. They had the president of the United States fly into town. They had the previous president of the U.S. come into town. They've got 26 Democratic senators that have signed up for support. They had Bernie Sanders come in for a rally. They've got media from literally all over the world approaching them. I mean, once the contract gets signed, all that comes to an end. And so I think they're highly motivated to keep this going, again, because they're trying to kick off a new labor movement in the U.S. So it goes far beyond GM, Ford, Stellantis, and the UAW.
For sure. I mean, you've got employees on strike at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. People don't realize there's a bunch of union employees over there. And on top of that, the Detroit casinos, I talked about this on our show earlier, the Detroit casinos are on the verge of a strike as well. It's I don't want to be flippant about it, but it really feels like a hot labor summer.
Well, look, there's no question that working class people have lagged behind over the last couple of decades, and the people at the top have become fabulously wealthy. They already were, and now it's, I don't know how many times greater than that. So there's a recognition across the country that it's time to make up for what was lost. And I support the UAW in that, but only up to a point. And my fear is it does not see the big picture. I'll give you one great example. The third quarter car sales just came out. The Hyundai Group, which includes Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis, are only 47,000 sales behind the Ford Motor Company. Ford is now facing a strike at its Chicago plant and its Wayne plant in Michigan. And if those two plants lose just 23 days of production due to the strike, the Hyundai Group is going to surpass Ford in sales in the American market. Toyota has already gone past Ford. So GM's still at the top, but that means two of the top three car companies in America are going to be foreign car companies. And I'm not sure the union sees that kind of a big picture. I don't know if it recognizes it's seriously damaging the tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers' supply chain. And it's entirely possible that Sean Fain wins the battle but loses the war, hands more market share to the foreign automakers, and that ends up costing the UAW jobs.
Well, that gets into the issue of labor leverage, right? If the UAW, if almost everybody was unionized, this would be a different situation. In reality, only a portion of auto workers in America are unionized. And frankly, a lot of brands, and I hate to say this because I am a Detroit homer through and through, but when you travel, there's a lot less American cars on the roads, especially outside of the pickup truck segment.
Yeah, look, foreign car companies have 60%, that's 60% of the American market. The domestic automakers are now down to 40%. It's a shrinking pie for them. And again, that's where I worry that the UAW is not looking at the big picture. It's looking out for its own interests, and I get it. I get that. But again, I come back to this analogy of winning the battle but losing the war.
What about the question that maybe, and I'm just going to reflect what some listeners have asked, if you see your compatriot that is on the line making more money and you're at one of those foreign automakers, it seems like the UAW has had a lot of trouble making inroads with those. Could a bigger contract help cause some issues with the other ones, or what's the gap there historically?
The union has been spectacularly unsuccessful at organizing any of the transplants, that is the assembly plants and production plants owned by foreign automakers, or the startups. This includes Tesla and Lucid and Rivian and whoever else decides to jump into the market. And they've been unsuccessful because if you look at the transplants from the Japanese, the Koreans, the Germans, whatever, they go into rural areas and they build these big manufacturing facilities and they pay the best wages and offer the best benefits possible within a 100-mile radius, at least 100 miles. So they may not be UAW wages, but they're far better than any job that any of those people can get anywhere else. They treat their workers really well, and they tell their workers, why would you want the UAW? If you have an issue, you come right to us and we sit down and we talk. If the union comes in, you're going to have to go through them if you have any grievances. They'll tell them, look, the last two UAW presidents went to federal prison. It's a corrupt organization. And look at all these people who are on strike right now. They're only making $500 a week. Do you want to go through that? Do you want to pay union dues, maybe face a strike and only make $500 a week? And so far, those arguments have been pretty good. And every time the union has gotten wage increases, the transplants also increased the wages of their workers just enough to keep the union out. And so I think it's highly unlikely, even if the UAW gets very generous improvements in pay and benefits, and like I said, I'm in favor of that, it's highly unlikely that the transplant workers are going to say, hey, I want the union too. Their companies will just pay them more, and they'll still make the best money that they can get anywhere in their area.
I can't help but think of the history books I've read because what you tell me they say is very similar to, say, what Henry Ford and others said in automotive years past, but there's definitely a different application and a different success rate because in those days, the UAW did make inroads. Here, they're just not. Do you think change in leadership would help that?
It's possible. We'll see. Sean Fain has proved himself to be a very different UAW leader, unlike any I've ever seen in my career time. And so maybe he can crack the code on how to organize them. I can tell you this. The CEOs of GM, Ford, and Stellantis are praying for them to go out and organize the other transplants. They would love to see this happen because they're at a serious labor cost disadvantage right now. So here are the rough numbers. Workers at GM, Ford, and Stellantis earn about, all in, this includes all benefits, everything. The cost to the company is $65 an hour. The transplants pay anywhere from $50 to $55 an hour. So they're anywhere from $10 to $15 at a disadvantage. And Tesla is estimated to pay about $45 an hour. So Tesla has a $20 an hour labor cost advantage. Again, I come back to, does the union see the big picture here? That is a substantial cost gap. And the new contract is only going to make that gap bigger.
I also know that with some of those foreign automakers, like Tesla specifically, they actually do stock options instead of the yearly payments and bonuses that you see. They're like, hey, we're going to do more of like if you're a tech worker as opposed to a floor worker.
Well, number one, Tesla is very American. It is a fully American company, not foreign. And it's unclear whether Tesla still pays workers in stock. Tesla has never publicly talked about this. It's others who have talked about it. And it's unclear if that's still happening because we do know in the past, Elon Musk has bragged that some of his line workers have become millionaires because of the profits they made off the stock that they were paid with. Well, guess what? Anyone who's a millionaire working on the line says, enough of this already. I'm out of here. I'm going to go enjoy life. And so we don't know for sure, again, because Tesla will not talk about this publicly, but it doesn't look like they're paying stock anymore because they lose workers as soon as they make bundles of profits off it.
And I apologize that I misspoke because obviously, yes, Tesla is an American firm. But that does get me to think about the electric vehicle race and the differences in different countries where, I know that you mentioned that the battery plants are part of this. Where does Detroit and the domestic three kind of stand in this EV race? Because it feels like this is the future. And then I think some people, especially locally, there's a big difference here. I feel like locally, there's this large skepticism about EVs. But when I talk to some reporters or friends outside, they're like, yeah, we're all going to EVs one day. So I guess that's a two-part question. It's not the cleanest question in the world. But where are we at with EVs?
Very early days still. I mean, Tesla dominates the EV market. It sells more electrics in the United States than everybody else put together. And they're about to come out with their Cybertruck, which is probably going to boost sales even more. GM is struggling. The Chevy Bolt is selling decent, not great, but decent. But GM has really put its bet on what it calls its Ultium platform, which is a clean sheet design, a new battery design. But they're really struggling to get production going. Ford has got the Mach-E and the Lightning out there, the pickup. Sales of the Lightning dropped dramatically in the third quarter. The Mach-E is sort of holding its own, but Ford's really pinning its hopes on its next generation EV and EV batteries, which will not be out until 2025 or 2026. So Ford's going to suffer tremendously over the next 3 years until those vehicles come out. Stellantis really isn't even in the game yet. I mean, it's got an electric pickup coming, an electric version of the Dodge Charger coming, but it's not even in the picture so far. And meanwhile, keep an eye on the Hyundai group, which includes Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis. They are outselling Ford in EVs in the U.S. market right now. Toyota's starting to get real serious about EVs. So the race is on. We're going to see who makes it through. But by the end of the decade, the ranking of car companies is going to be very different than it is right now.
And that doesn't sound like great news for Detroit at this moment, the way you're portraying it.
It may not. We don't know. Like I said, it's very early days. But again, getting back to the UAW, this is why I worry. Are they looking at the big picture?
Mm. Do you think that EV adoption is inevitable?
I do, actually. I mean, look, unfortunately, like everything in this country, EVs have become politicized. And, I can almost tell you, it's not entirely true. I can almost tell you who's going to buy an EV and who will not based on their political affiliation.
That's 100% true, even among my friends. Like, I know that to be a fact.
Exactly. And so you've got almost half the country who do not believe in climate change. They think that EVs are stupid, and they think the government's trying to shove it down their throat. And they want nothing to do with them. Nothing. And so that would suggest, just based on that EV penetration at the best is going to reach 50% because the other half of the market doesn't want anything to do with them. The only thing that's going to change that, in my opinion, is when EVs get to the point where they are just so compelling, even the people who today think they're stupid are going to go, I'm not going to buy that internal combustion engine vehicle anymore because it doesn't make any sense. And I think one of the things that's going to change that is what they call bidirectional charging, where you can plug your EV in and charge your battery up during periods of low demand. So you're literally buying electricity at the lowest rates possible. And then you sell it back to the utilities during high demand. And there's some really interesting numbers that start to come out of that, wherein you may have zero electric bill at the end of the month. In fact, in certain circumstances, you may even get a check from your local utility instead of a bill. When you think about, whether it's, bad weather, knocking out the grid and being able to just plug your electric car into your house and run your house for a week until the power comes back on, things like that start to make electric cars look far more compelling than owning something that burns gasoline.
Yeah, and I imagine one of the reasons why in other countries you're seeing some advancements is gas is more expensive in some of those other countries. And then I heard on another show something interesting that China's even changing the playing field by saying, you know what, there's a $10,000 registration fee for a gas car, no registration fee for an electric car. And we're in a global market, so whatever America wants to do is one thing, but I feel like if you want to sell in some of those other markets, you kind of have to comport to it, and it's kind of hard to have two different systems.
It is. Look, GM, Ford, and Stellantis are global car companies. And if you want to play in China, you better be going electric because you're going to lose tremendously if you do not. And Europe is not as far ahead as China is in this, but Europe is going into EVs far faster than we are. And so again, if you want to be competitive there, you've got to get into it because the race right now for the legacy automakers is reaching manufacturing scale. People forget about this, but Tesla lost money for over a decade. It lost billions of dollars, but then it hit that magic number in terms of manufacturing scale, and it's never looked back. And that's what everybody else is racing to get to right now, is once you hit that magic number, which in the industry roughly is 80% of capacity utilization, you become a money machine after that. And that's where we stand right now. And if you're not going electric in the U.S., you're not going to have that manufacturing scale. You'll never catch up. And, the real danger is that there are some Chinese companies, BYD in particular, that are phenomenal. That company's coming on like gangbusters. In fact, on a global basis, BYD in the third quarter surpassed Ford Motor Company in global sales.
That is a huge change. That makes me think of another thing that I wasn't going to ask about, but in my head, it's very pertinent to a lot of listeners, is affordability. That is a thing that, if you're mid-career or less, like owning a car, getting a new car is still a dream for a lot of people, but they feel more and more that it's out of reach. The payments keep going up. You've got interest rates as well, but the industry can't control that. But you've got these costs and things going up. Is there a danger that another automaker could come in and kind of grab a more affordable segment?
Oh, easily. Very easily. The Chinese are exporting cars all around the world right now. We do not see that in the U.S. because they're avoiding the U.S. because of the political tension. But they're absolutely taking over the markets in South America, Mexico. China is now the number one exporter of cars to Mexico. Southeast Asia, Africa, even Europe, you name it. China is taking over the automotive world. And they will be able to come into this market, even with the very high tariffs that we've placed on Chinese cars, and sell very good looking cars, very well engineered, built to world class levels of technology and quality, and sell them for under $20,000 and still make a profit.
Wow.
And that's the real danger. They will come in and take over the bottom end of the U.S. market very, very easily.
I hate to say that that's exactly what I feared you would say.
Yeah, it is. And they're just waiting for the right time. I think they're going to watch the presidential elections next year and judge accordingly whether it's appropriate for them to come in or not. But once they decide to pull the trigger, they're going to come in a big way.
Wow. So what can be done with the domestic three? What do Ford, Stellantis, and GM, what are they looking at? Let's close this with kind of what do they need to do? What are some of the steps that need to be taken?
Well, number one, they got to get down on their knees and pray every single night that big pickups and big SUVs continue to be the kind of things that Americans want to buy, Americans with the money to pay for those prices, and keep on doing it. That's where they make all their money. If all of a sudden Americans wake up one day and go, I don't need to buy a pickup anymore, that's the end of the big three as we know them. So they've got to keep that going. They've also got to hope that the UAW can organize the transplants, because they're going to come out of this contract at even a greater labor cost disadvantage than they had before it even all started. And they've got to hope that they can hit that magic manufacturing scale in EVs and not lose billions of dollars on them, but instead make billions of dollars on them. And that's a lot of hope and wishes.
Do you think they've got the tools to do it?
They've got the tools to do it. There's no question. Look, these are three very powerful companies. I'm talking about Stellantis in general, but the Chrysler Group, the old Chrysler Group within Stellantis, is the real moneymaker for the company. They make over half the profits for the company. The talent, the technological knowledge, the capabilities that we have in Southeast Michigan is unmatched anywhere in the world. There are other regions that have really good skills and everything that I just mentioned, but they do not have the concentration of it. In Southeast Michigan, not only do we have General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, Toyota's got a massive engineering campus here because this is where the talent is. Nissan's got a really good size engineering campus here for the very same reason. Hyundai, Kia have a big engineering campus here, and they just announced plans to double the size of it. Why? Because the talent is here. On top of that, we have every single major tier one supplier in the world here with R&D and engineering and even North American headquarters here. Any other region on the face of the earth would give their eye teeth to have what we have. And we've got to preserve that and grow it and nurture it so that we keep this incredible wealth generator right where it is right now.
John McElroy, Autoline.tv. Always appreciate your insights and your time.
Thanks so much, Jared. Pleasure talking with you.
Feedback, as always, dailydetroit@gmail.com or 313-789-3211. That's 313-789-3211. Got a ton of comments about yesterday's show. I will share some of them in a future episode. If you missed it, go back and see what the hubbub's all about. All right, thank you so much for listening. I am Jer Stays. Remember that you are somebody, and I'll see you around Detroit.